invite all people who form the multicultural fabric of our society today to come together and to listen and to learn. The stories you'll be hearing tonight are not so much performances as they are personal sharings and personal truths.
Thank you to Val Rogers for that wonderful introduction for tonight's event. I'm Anna Byers, Rogue World Music's Program Director, and welcome to the 2021 Ashland World Music Festival HeartBeat Stories. Tonight you'll be hearing two storytellers, Vance Beach, the founder of Black Alliance and Social Empowerment of Southern Oregon, or BASE, and Tia McLean, a local teacher in the Ashland School District. We'll begin with Vance's story. Let's welcome Vance to the stage.
Home. Home is a place that feels good. Home is a place where you're comfortable, where you feel safe, where you feel connected, where you feel supported. Home is a place where you feel that you have the opportunity and possibilities to be the best that you can be and do anything and go above and beyond any measures that are potentially set. As a Black man in this country, I feel that growing up, deep down in my subconscious, I'd actually always been looking for home. Not where I came from, but where I come from. I feel that I've been so disconnected from my truth. You know, growing up, you're taught a lot about the civil rights movement. You're taught a lot about slavery. Well, not a lot. You're just kind of told about slavery. But if you think about the things that those things right there that I just mentioned, that is telling the young mind that you are not home. That is telling the young mind that you, who you are connected to, your people, have done nothing but try to be accepted. It is teaching you that you don't belong here. Whoa. In West Africa, they have a term called Sankofa. Sankofa is the picture, the image of a bird, and it is looks like a goose, and the feet of this bird are facing forward, and the head and neck are facing backwards. In fact, its beak is in its feathers behind. And what this symbolizes is that it means, basically, we must go back to retrieve what is good, to retrieve what is necessary or needed in order to propel ourselves further forward. So beautiful. I mean, so much of what we need. We must go back to understand and receive the information, what we need, all that is good to go further ahead. When I learned about our greatness, our great civilizations, our great cultures, our great legends and peoples, and that was home. That was a great feeling. That felt good. For me, it's been an active search. An active search. We're in an environment that is unnatural, and we're expected to act natural. But in fact, we're acting natural because we're in an unnatural environment. When you're not included, accepted, when you're isolated, when you are supposed to feel differently in a negative way, because there's nothing wrong with being different. But when you're supposed to feel differently in a negative way, that's not home. That's not home. Home is where you're comfortable. Home is where you feel comfortable enough to, if you're having a bad day, to act out. If you're having a good day, to act out or act in, whatever. You're comfortable, and you know you have support. You know you have connections. You know you have a place and a space that values you and sees you as necessary. That's home. My journey in discovering that and coming across all of this is one of trying to establish that in the environment in which I live. Trying to connect with people, trying to create, trying to represent culture. The way I see a real, true community that feels home is one that values all that live in it. The way I see a true inclusive community is where all groups have representation within that community. I started to connect with a lot of Black community members around the community, just to make sure they know that we are here and there is support here and that we can do this. And at first it was very, very awkward, but I would say it was awkward for me to go amongst strangers and try to connect with them and say, hey, let's continue to have connections and let's continue to support each other and let's continue to have and work towards a representative cultural people within this community. At first it was unusual, but it was only unusual to me. What I ended up finding out going to all of these community members, what started off as about 5 to 10, today, years later, a few years later, we're at 430. What started off as just 5 to 10 connections and now 430. What I found is that every single time I connected with somebody, they were so appreciative that I did. They were so appreciative because little did I know they were looking for the same thing. They were looking for the same thing. I think we all desire to have a place that we can call home that feels good. Our organization base is trying to make sure not only we're building community and having connection within the community, but that we are creating a space and a place for support resources, and ultimately the advancement of people. You know, having cultural celebrations, representation within the community. Culture is so essential to the foundation of feeling at home because culture is your values, it's your interests, it's your principles, it's your language, it's your history, all of it. And I know that when you include those into a community and there's a filled sense of value, you're creating a sense of home. A sense of home. I'm still seeking it. It's not something that has been fully accomplished yet, but we're on our way. What I will say is that we're at the door of our home. We found it. And in fact, it might even be cracked open. I am still waiting to walk through it though. And I know that's going to happen soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Vance for that beautiful meditation on the idea of home and what makes a place feel like home. Let's welcome Tia to the stage now. Tia is not only a teacher, but a fantastic dancer who happened to perform with the Halau Hula Kapioke Anue Nue Hula Group during our main stage show. Welcome, Tia.
Hana is our family's home. It is the home that we will always return to. My great-grandmother, Luukia Pelekai, lost her husband, my grandpa, Tutuman, Grandpa Kala, when her youngest was 2. And Uncle Clyde, one of my uncles, her son, who was always really mischievous and a rascal and an incredible fisherman, everybody's favorite uncle, knew that with his dad gone, he needed to help feed the family. And so at 6 years old, he started going down to Hana Bay every day and fishing off of the pier. And he would bring home enough manini for everybody in the family to eat. When Uncle Clyde got older, he went to school at Kamehameha School on Oahu. And my tutu was determined that all of her kids would get a good education. And there wasn't a school in Hana at that time for them to go to. So he went off to Oahu and was forced to march if he ever spoke Hawaiian. And so he lost a lot of his language at that time. But every day during the long, long lectures, he would hold his breath as long as he could and watch the clock so that when he got home to Hana, he could free dive and bring fish home to the family and the community. And he was a local legend at that time. He could hold his breath, it would say, for 16 minutes. He would swim with the sharks, the mano, the puhi, the eel, and always bring home the best catch. His dad, my grandpa Kala, was also an incredible fisherman, and there was a special fishing spot at Hana Bay that no one knew about except for Grandpa Kala. And they didn't have much money and would fish and farm for everything they had. And so when his dad died, Grandpa Kala was determined to find this fishing spot. And so he wove together the stories and he wove together his memory, and he found the spot where his dad would fish, where he had to go out past the pier, out past the lighthouse, through the currents, and find the just right moment, not only to swim out, but to gently wrap the net around his elbow, around his body, and stand still on the rock till the exact moment when he needed to cast the net out in a beautiful cloud that would gently fall down on the fish and bring them all in and home to the family. And so Uncle Clyde showed my dad that fishing spot. And so my dad was able to bring fish home to us when we were little kids. But I didn't really understand at that time. And I remember going with my uncle and my dad, and they would always bring the fish in, and I was so sad to see all the fish dying, and I would sneak over as a little kid, as a little kiki, and try to throw the fish back in the ocean. And Uncle Clyde would come over and be like, Tia, Palanayo, throw the fish back, that's dinner. And so you always listen, in Hawaii, you always listen, especially to your elders, especially to Uncle Clyde. And so even though I was crying, I'd be like, okay, Uncle, and I would throw the fish back. He was always everybody's favorite uncle. He had the best laugh and always reminded me of home. Anytime I left Hawaii, I would always just remember Hana Bay and hear Uncle Clyde's laugh. When Uncle Clyde retired on Oahu, he had a stroke and was paralyzed on his left side. And at that time, he knew he needed to come home to Hana, to come home to Maui. And even though he couldn't fish, it was still really important for him that fishing and the sharing and the gathering was still happening in his community. And so he fixed up Tutu's house and lived there, and he made sure that anytime any of the Mo'opuna, the grandchildren, the Pelikai grandchildren came home, that he would teach them about how to throw net. And I remember one summer coming home from college and going to visit Uncle Clyde, and he was trying to teach me how to throw net. He would always say to the grandkids, oh, you gotta practice your Hawaiian skills. So I went over and he had his friend come over to try to teach me to throw net, and I was so bad. I was terrible. He was like, Tia, I've never had any of the grandchildren be this bad at throwing net. And he took me to the fish ponds where it's almost like an aquarium. It's glassy and green and blue, and the fish just live there like a tank in your house. And even then I couldn't catch a fish. And Uncle Clyde would just shake his head and say, oh, Palanayo, Palanayo. And so my kids were so lucky to get to meet Uncle Clyde and learn from Uncle Clyde and enjoy fish with Uncle Clyde. And he figured out a way, even though he couldn't scale the fish with both hands, he made a contraption with a piece of wood and a nail, and he would stick the fish on the nail so that he could use one hand to scale it, so he could fry and dry all of his fish. And I remember sitting down at the table and my girls loving his akule so much. And one summer when we were home, he said, you gotta go, the akule are in. And we still had the ocean in our hair and salt on our toes, and we ran down to Hana Bay, the bay where he and all of his friends would hang out at every day, the akule hale. And all of the uncles wanted to make sure that the community could enjoy the akule, and so they would send the fishing boats out. And when the fishing boats came back, they were heaping with fish, and somehow, like a murmuration, everybody in the community would know that the akule had come home to Hana that day. The akule had come home to feed the community. And so our family got to go and experience the hukilau, the sharing of community and the sharing of food. And silently and happily, everyone took the fish out of the nets and gently put them on the ground, and the keiki ran around and grabbed the fish and put them in the buckets. And after we were pau, the kupuna said, let's pule, and everyone gathered and held hands and said a prayer to Keakua, to mahalo the aina, to mahalo the fish, to mahalo the fishermen, to mahalo Keakua for the bounty of that day. And everybody left with fish that day. Everybody left with their share, and even the people in the community who couldn't be there left with their share of fish. And the feeling of love in their hearts, knowing that sense of togetherness and home and community still lived through the fishing, through the sharing. a few years after that, Uncle Clyde passed away, and we took his ashes out to Hana Bay and scattered them in that same bay where he fished for manini for his family as a child and dove bravely with the mano and the puhi as a young man, and helped gather and share the akule even as a man who could not fish then. He now swims in that bay with the akule, home forever in Hana Bay, with my grandma and my uncle and my dad. Home at last. Home forever. Home in Hana.
Thank you to Tia and Vance again for taking to the stage to share these truths connected to the idea of home. If you would like to support our fire displaced community members as they seek to renew their sense of home and renew their actual place of home, you can support them at www.rogueworldmusic.org/AWMF fundraiser. All funds raised go to the Unite Farm Workers and Immigrant Families Fire Relief Fund and support everyday basic living needs like food, clothing, shelter, and gas. Thank you for participating in tonight's stories and for helping us restore and strengthen our community connections.